Have you ever been humiliated? Ooh, that is a curious question, and it is still full of compassion. Welcome to this episode of Love Learning You. I'm your hostess, Justine González, and this is a YouTube only episode. I have had a long-standing podcast, but I do a lot of teaching videos that are just for the YouTube community. So if this is for you and you're a person who is in the process of being humiliated or humbled, then stay tuned because there's a difference. So let's hop into it because one of the things that I know in the workplace right now and in career in 2026 and beyond, so much has been changing and shifting. Whether you have decided to leave a profession through the years, which is quite common because often when we go for a job when we're 20, 22, 24, we don't want the same things. Or often we don't want the same things when we are almost 40 and then almost 60 and then almost 80, whatever those timelines are in your story and in your life. So why am I talking about this here? Especially, we've been engaged in a four-part learning series on belief systems. Part four is gearing up to release. But I wanted to do this quick little just question because I was pondering it a lot last week. I started working with a new coach. It was an awesome experience. Highly recommend, but make sure the coaches you work with are aligned. I've worked with many through the years. Not all have been aligned. And in fact, here we are to our main topic. I've even been humiliated by some. Why? Because I didn't want to follow their process exactly. But then I've also been humbled by others. I think there's a big difference in our lives when there's situations that humble us and they provide us with redirection and refinement for our skills and talents, for who we are, for how we show up, versus when we are humiliated. And humiliation, when that's done intentionally, it is often done by those who want to assert power because of their own insecurities or situations where even a lot of our government systems, right? So if you haven't, check out part three and I'll link that one below. I really got into what I call the trifecta of fear: patriarchy, capitalism, and the socio-political construct of race. So I just also recently discovered a timeline thing that might be intriguing to know when you're talking about these systems, how they are designed, what they are conflated with in our world. Many are designed to make us feel humiliated about who we are. The exact opposite of what the divine, all that is divine and good and love, and also the great creator, that we're made in that perfect image as is, but also divinely unique in each of our own individual rights, but having so much in common to be one with the spirit and essence of love. And wouldn't you know, this timeline pattern that I noticed recently was that the IRS, the American Cancer Foundation or Society, whatever it's called, as well as the Federal Reserve were all created in guess when? 1913, the year before World War I broke out, 1914. We also learn that three men who were not on board with the approach to capitalism that the Rockefellers, JP Morgan Chase, etc. were adhering to at the time, those three, they were on the Titanic. Who owned the Titanic? JP Morgan. And he decided at the last minute not to go on it. So I'll just leave that right there. But this is why I've always loved to read. And so if you've been around here long enough, you know I always reference books and stuff. I'm always talking about reading. I think when I released on here a course, I designed it actually a year ago, and it was based on the four agreements as well as one other text, but it was about stuff like this. Anyways, I'm getting off track with you all now. Um, the whole point of me saying that was often in our lives, and I talked about this in part three, but often in our lives, we are looking at something as humbling, but actually it's humiliation. And sometimes the things that we need to not be humiliated about which is like most things. Like nobody can actually make you feel a certain way either. I know it sucks. I know because sometimes you just want to say that made me feel this way. No, my reaction to what was said or done made me feel that way. That is on us to process our reaction to anything, whether we label it negative or positive, sad, mad, happy, content, whatever. I want to put that out there. Humbling, however, is when we learn through our experiences that, oh, I could do this differently this time. You know, when somebody gets remarried or they get a brand new career opportunity, I could fill in the blank for any big life events or something you're doing again, but differently. That's my idea of the humbling process, the refinement process, going into a refiner's fire like a piece of clay and saying, whoa, that didn't go so well the first time around. Let me try it again. I think that humbling is a vital step in developing our self-awareness and also in engaging in the continuous improvement process because we are all human beings. We're not just stayings. We don't just stay stagnant. If you stay and you don't want to evolve, what's the opposite of evolution? Extinction. So when I talk about the difference between humbling versus humiliating, the reason I like to insert those little facts and details, not only because I love history and patterns, but also because we have to be very aware of the very intentional, very strategic systems that, guess what? Where did I hear most? And I ranted about this in part three. I heard most the adherence to IRS, money stuff, etc. growing up. Where was that shaped most? In the church. And I grew up in a fundamentalist Baptist church and then an evangelical and then have departed from much of a lot of religious guardrails, so to speak, or things that I grew up in through the years. But you could catch more details about that in part three. But I say that to say many world religions are designed, and when I talk about the Roman Empire, for example, using biblical scriptures, they stole from Ethiopian and Kenyan Christian churches, by the way, and then omitted what they wanted, changed what they wanted. This is why Paul was very vital in spreading the gospel, but in edited forms, in my opinion. His letters are all throughout the New Testament and they speak a lot of good truth, but they don't speak all of Jesus's truth. And it was also, I mean, we have an entire translation of the Bible that is known around the world, translated and named after King James. Just looking at who King James was. So I want to say that with a disclaimer, not because we shouldn't all look at things with fresh eyes and skepticism. We should, even if we love it, even if we adore Christ, even if we adore God. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't question the authors of the Bible. And quite frankly, at this stage of the game, if you're not willing to question what you believe, then you are going against scripture. And I will keep it more Bible based since a lot of my audience base is United States. And if you are international, which is also a large number of our viewers and listeners, then you'll know that I give that disclaimer if I'm talking about something in the more North American continent, I'll put it that way, and across the Caribbean as well as South America, because we were so heavily colonized throughout history. And it is Christianity that has been the disclaimer of this is the way, the truth, and the life. Do I believe the teachings of Christ are the way, the truth, and the life? Absolutely. But do I think that the Bible has been bastardized? Absolutely. And here's an example of how. And again, in part three, I referenced this common phrase that you hear in a lot of Christian churches. Well, you got to pay Caesar. Again, why are we not questioning what's coming out of our mouth? Wait, what? Wait, why didn't we look at, well, when this was developed and why it was developed and why these programs come about all before big wars start? Because they need funding to make it happen. And it's never been about war. The US has over 800 different sites around the world where they have military bases. Do you know the next highest country is something insane like they maybe have 12? So a lot of the things that are designed, we'll use that word, designed intentionally for harm and humiliation to make you feel humiliated, like, oh, you're caught in this. Oh, well, we're gonna do this to you, even though the systems are made up. The systems are made up to serve the purpose of a small handful of families and beings who do not want love as the highest essence for humanity. They don't seek unconditional love. They seek absolute power, which underneath it is filled with greed, selfishness, wickedness, etc. So when I think about these two words alone and just in reflection, of humbling versus being humiliated, think about what types of people and systems you're around. And it's inevitable, unless we're aware of it, that many of us just subscribe to that and say, oh, well, yeah, you got to do this. Oh, yeah, well, you got to file that. Who said and why? And what are they going to do to you if you don't? What are they going to do if enough people don't? And that could be healthcare systems and people relying on their own village and holistic knowledge and natural homeopathic practices, whatever the thing is. And whatever are the pieces in your life that often might give you this vibe of humiliation, just know that's not the same as being humbled and understanding how to humble yourself in a learning process. So I wanted to throw that out there because they both have very similar root words in context, but it was something I was pondering a lot after I got to work with a new coach last week. It was an amazing experience, and I had a lot of personal transformation, and it had me thinking a lot about what is the difference between being humiliated and being humbled? And these are the types of questions that I love to explore here on Love Learning You. So let's keep getting compassionately curious together on the podcast that helps us to listen, learn, and lead consciously. Take care.